My name is Madeline Carter. I'm 32 years old, an architect living and working in Seattle, the city where skyscrapers cast their shadows over Lake Union at every sunset. I've been married to Brandon for 6 years. We're both deeply career-driven, and because of that, having children has always been postponed for someday. Our apartment is in a high-rise downtown just a few light rail stops from my office. From the outside, my life might look like a modern dream. A stable career, a well-furnished home, a handsome and courteous husband always busy with business trips. But behind the door that closes every night, I often feel a quiet emptiness threading through every breath. Lately, I've been pouring all my time and energy into a major project called the Aurora Complex, a modern green architecture development that, if successful, could be the stepping stone to a senior partner position at my firm. This project isn't just work. It's a dream I've chased since I was an intern, a structure that could transform the entire neglected northern part of the city, left behind by outdated urban planning. That afternoon, as the winter sunlight tilted across the bare trees on Pine Street, I returned home after 10 exhausting hours of blueprints, technical reports, and endless meetings. Just as I took off my shoes at the door, I heard Brandon's voice from the living room. "You're home? Was today okay?" His voice was still warm, still familiar, but with a distant undertone. I forced a smile, hung my coat on the rack, and walked into the living room. Brandon was on the sofa, his laptop open in front of him, but his eyes were glued to his phone. He put it down when he saw me. "I almost missed the train back," I said, half joking. "Seattle rush hour is no joke." Brandon gave a faint smile, but it faded quickly, replaced by his usual composed and slightly distant expression. "I get it," he said. "Your work's at a critical stage, but don't you think it might be time to slow down a bit? I mean, spending time together matters too, right?" I hesitated. It wasn't the first time he'd said that. Lately, he'd been bringing it up more often, each time more subtly, like he was testing the waters. "The Aurora project will be done in a few months," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "Once it's finished, we can take a long vacation or even start thinking about what's next." Brandon nodded, saying nothing more. The room fell into a soft silence, lit only by the glow of the building across the street. The next morning, I woke up early to prepare breakfast. As I brushed my hand over the calendar on the fridge, I noticed something small but striking. Next week was my 33rd birthday. I turned to Brandon just as he came down the stairs, his tie still uneven. "Next Friday. Do you have any plans?" I asked casually, though part of me hoped for something. Brandon paused, then looked at me apologetically. "Oh, I have to go to Los Angeles for a meeting with the partners," he said, hesitant. "It's been scheduled for a while, kind of hard to move." I tried to hide the flicker of disappointment in my eyes. "It's okay. I understand. Work's important." "I'm really sorry," Brandon said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I promise. I'll make it up to you." I nodded, but deep down, the letdown lingered. In that moment, I recalled the many times he had said, "I'll make it up to you." And each time, nothing ever really got made up. I didn't know when the distance between us began, only that it had grown more noticeable, like fine cracks in concrete that seem harmless at first, but if ignored, one day could become a break too wide to repair. And I had no idea that the upcoming birthday week would be the moment that changed my entire life. On Saturday evening, a soft rain began to fall in Seattle, droplets trailing down my windshield as I drove to Riverstone, the restaurant where my parents had invited me for dinner with my younger sister, Sienna. I wasn't surprised to hear Sienna would be there. In my memory, there'd never been a family dinner where she wasn't the center of attention. Sienna is 3 years younger than me and used to be the face of a well-known fashion brand on the West Coast. She always knew how to shine. From her cinched silk dress to her glittering earrings, it's like the light just naturally followed her. While I battled deadlines and construction plans, Sienna's smile on Instagram was enough to make the world shower her with praise. And of course, my parents never stopped complimenting her. I walked into the restaurant, my hair still slightly damp from the rain, and saw them already seated at a window-side table. My mom, Elaine, glanced at her watch, then frowned slightly when her eyes met mine. "Madeline, you're late," she said. Not harsh, but with that familiar tone of quiet comparison. "Sorry, it's raining and I just left the construction site," I replied, pulling out my chair. "They needed to adjust the glass canopy structure." "It's always about work," my dad, Gerald, said softly, barely louder than a whisper, but I heard it clearly. Sienna smiled and gently touched our mom's hand. "Mom, do you see this bracelet I'm wearing? It was a gift from last week's gala event. They gave it to VIP guests only." My mom leaned in for a better look, her eyes lighting up like she'd just spotted a rare antique. "It's beautiful, so elegant. Totally your style," she praised, completely forgetting I had arrived just 30 seconds earlier. I sipped my water, staying quiet. I hadn't felt sad about the favoritism in a long time. But the silence still left a chill in my heart. When the main course arrived, I tried to steer the conversation. My Aurora Complex project just finished phase 1. The city gave very positive feedback. There's a good chance I'll be considered for partner sooner than expected. My dad looked up for a few seconds, then returned to his knife and fork. "That's good," he said. "But don't get too caught up in it. You're at that age. You should start thinking about having kids." I set my utensils down, trying to keep my tone calm. "Brandon and I are still thinking about it. We're both busy, but—" "Madeline," my mom interrupted. "You're 33. You can't keep putting it off. I want a grandchild before it's too late." Sienna chuckled playfully. "Come on, Mom. She loves her work more than kids. Probably needs a few more projects before she'll even think about diapers." The words were gentle, but they stung like velvet-covered thorns. I looked at my sister, hoping for a hint of empathy, but her eyes only sparkled with amusement at my discomfort. "You don't really believe that, do you?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. Sienna shrugged. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. You're always serious, always at the office. And Brandon, I don't even know when you two last had a date night." My parents didn't step in, just stayed silent as if Sienna's words were the natural truth. I clenched my hands under the table. What they didn't know was that I once dreamed of having a family too, but that dream kept getting postponed, buried under contracts to sign, meetings that ran into the night, and the growing distance between me and the man I once thought would always be my safe place to come home to. That night, when I returned to the apartment, Brandon was sitting on the sofa, the dim living room light casting soft shadows across his face. I gave him a brief recap of the dinner, trying to use the gentlest words possible. "Same as always?" he asked, remote in hand but eyes on me. I nodded. They talked. About children, and Sienna chimed in too. Brandon put the remote down and walked over to wrap his arm around my shoulders. "Don't let it get to you. You're the strongest woman I've ever known." I rested my head on his shoulder, but the feeling lingered. There was something in Sienna's eyes tonight that made me uneasy. Not just the usual sarcasm, but a strange confidence. Like she knew something I didn't. I'm not the type to worry needlessly, but my gut has never been wrong. The week before my birthday passed like a whirlwind. The Aurora project had entered the rooftop construction phase, and I had to be on site almost every day. The pressure weighed on me. And the long, quiet nights in the empty apartment stretched even longer. Brandon said he was preparing for a business trip to Chicago, a meeting with a partner that couldn't be postponed. I didn't ask further. To be honest, I'd grown used to his unmovable trips. Early Friday morning on my 33rd birthday, strong winds suddenly swept through Seattle. Rain pelted the scaffolding, forcing the construction team to scramble and reinforce the safety frame. I wore a hard hat, a thick coat, and walked with the head supervisor to check the glass canopy outside the main hall. "I want to extend this overhang," I said, pointing at the design on my iPad. "If we adjust the slope here, rainwater will drain more efficiently." "I see that, but, Ms. Carter," he hesitated. It's really slippery over there. How about I check it for you? I smiled and shook my head. It's all right, I just need a quick look. I stepped onto the slick steel platform, holding the railing for balance. But as I neared the edge of the scaffolding, I heard a faint screech from a metal sheet below. Everything after that happened too fast. A slip. Cold air rushing beneath my feet. Then someone's scream carried by the wind. I woke up in a bright white room, the smell of antiseptic thick in every breath. My head throbbed and my right leg felt immobile. A quiet, rhythmic beeping came from nearby, and a gentle voice spoke. "You're awake. That's great." I slowly turned my head. A blonde nurse with her hair tied neatly and a kind face stood by the bed, looking at me with concern. "I'm Nina, your attending nurse. You fell from the third-floor scaffolding. Your right leg is broken, but thankfully there's no spinal or internal damage." I nodded slightly, trying to stay calm. "How long have I been here?" "Just about 3 hours. We contacted your emergency numbers." I blinked. "My husband, does he know?" "We left a message. And I also called your mother, as listed in your medical record." I turned my head toward the window. The gray sky outside did nothing to mask the chill slowly spreading in my chest. I quietly picked up my phone to check. A message from Brandon. "Heard you had an accident. I'm at the airport heading to Chicago. Might not make it back in time, but I'll call after the meeting. Try to get some rest." I exhaled softly. Quiet. A few minutes later, a message from my mom. "Unfortunate timing. Dad and I have to babysit for Sienna today and tomorrow. I'll visit next week. Take care." No birthday wish, no real concern. I set the phone down and closed my eyes, not out of sadness, but because it all felt too familiar. That evening, as twilight settled, Nina returned to the room. On the tray she brought was a small cupcake with a pink candle. "Happy birthday," she smiled, lighting the candle. I blinked. "How did you know?" Nina shrugged. "Your birth date was right there in the file." "I know birthdays in hospitals aren't much fun, but still, today deserves a candle." My throat tightened. I nodded, trying to smile, but tears suddenly welled up. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means to me." "Oh, I do," Nina said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You're not alone." When I blew out the candle, I didn't make a wish. There were no wishes left, only emptiness, and a vague sense that everything in my life was about to change, in ways I couldn't yet imagine. 3 days after the accident, I started getting used to the hospital routine. The early mornings began with the sound of medication carts rolling by, the dim sunlight slipped through the curtains, and still, that aching silence from the people who were supposed to be here. Brandon hadn't shown up. Each day he sent only a few short texts, blaming packed meeting schedules. My mom and dad were completely absent, no calls, no check-ins. My sister Sienna only sent a heart sticker Monday night with a message, "Heard you fell, get well swamped." I gave a dry laugh reading that. There was a nameless ache growing in my chest, but I kept telling myself to stay strong. Be logical. Everyone has their own life. I've used work as an excuse to avoid family too, haven't I? One afternoon, after Nina helped me change the bandages and stepped out, I pulled out my phone to check work emails. The Aurora project was still going smoothly thanks to the engineers and project assistants managing things remotely. Still, I felt helpless not being there myself. As I scrolled down the screen, a notification popped up on Instagram. Sienna just posted a new story. I tapped it instinctively. In the short video, my sister was lounging by a pool, holding a glass of fruit juice, her hair neatly tied in a bun, oversized sunglasses on. Behind her was a stretch of blue sky and the pristine deck of a yacht. A yacht? I sat up abruptly, pain shot through my leg, and I gripped the blanket tightly. I opened Sienna's profile and scrolled through her recent posts. Lavish images, banquet tables, roses, champagne. All tagged at Avalon Yacht, one of the luxury cruise lines offering getaways around the San Juan Islands. I frowned. No one in the family had mentioned this trip. Not a word. I kept scrolling. Among the accounts Sienna followed, one name stood out. Sea Pearl Diary, with a profile picture of a beach at sunset. I tapped on it. The account was private, but the bio read, "My Real Diary, for family only." Curious, I sent a follow request. Less than 10 minutes later, it was accepted. I couldn't believe what I saw. It was Sienna's secondary account, where she posted things she'd never share on her main profile. Not the polished photos, not the edited highlights, but raw, unsettling moments. The latest post was a photo of a dining table on the yacht with my mom, dad, Sienna, and Brandon. I held my breath. Brandon was sitting at the head of the table, smiling, holding a glass of wine, with my mom leaning in beside him, beaming. Below the photo was the caption, "Finally having real fun. No one around to ruin the vibe anymore." I quickly scrolled through the previous posts. Another picture showed Brandon lounging on a beanbag chair, wearing a white t-shirt and sunglasses. The caption read, "Brandon's a great liar. I'm in a meeting in Chicago." More like meeting by the pool. My hands started to shake. The phone screen blurred through my tears. I couldn't take my eyes off those words. All the years of trust, the late nights working, the moments I tried to be the ideal wife. Turns out, it was all one-sided. They had planned to cut me out of the picture. On my birthday, while I lay immobile in a hospital bed, they raised their glasses on a yacht, laughing like I never existed. I took a deep breath and wiped my tears with the back of my hand. Nina walked in at that exact moment, holding a cup of juice. She paused at the doorway when she saw me. "Madeline, what's wrong?" I held out my phone for her to see. Nina's face froze. A moment later, she stepped forward and gently placed her hand on my shoulder. "Oh my, they really did this?" I nodded, my throat tight. "I've been betrayed. By my entire family. And the man I called my husband." Nina gave my shoulder a soft squeeze, saying nothing. I sat there for a long time. In the silence, I stared at my phone screen, where Brandon and Sienna's faces still smiled brightly. They didn't expect me to find out. But now I had. I opened the screenshot tool and saved everything. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel afraid. There was only one thing growing inside me: determination. That night, after discovering the truth, I couldn't sleep. The photos, the mocking captions, Brandon's smile next to my family, they played in my mind like slow, searing cuts. But instead of feeling crushed, I felt as if I had stepped out of a fog that had clouded my mind for years. The next morning, I hit the call button for Nina, and when she walked into the room with a tray of meds, I said directly, "You said you had a relative who's a lawyer, right?" Nina paused for a moment, then nodded. "My sister, Lauren, she's a family law attorney. Do you want me to reach out for you?" I nodded. "As soon as possible. I need legal advice, and maybe to start divorce proceedings." 4 days later, I was discharged from the hospital, my leg still in a brace, but my mindset had completely shifted. Brandon never came to pick me up. No calls, no messages. I didn't tell him I was leaving the hospital either. Instead, I called Avery, my best friend from college, the one who'd been there for me even before Brandon. "There's always a place for you at my place," Avery said over the phone. "Don't go back to that apartment, not right now." She lived in a quiet, cozy 2-bedroom apartment in Fremont, Columbia, completely opposite of the cold penthouse I used to call home. I moved in with just a suitcase and my laptop. Enough to start over. My first meeting with Lauren was in her office on the 10th floor of a glass building overlooking Lake Washington. She was in her 30s, petite, with sharp eyes and an unnervingly calm voice. After I laid out everything, Lauren nodded slowly. "You have strong evidence, photos, public posts, and even the deceptive messages. This isn't just a breach of trust, it's a breach of marital commitment." I handed her a USB with all the screenshots from Instagram, recent call logs, and messages from Brandon. "Are you ready to take this to court?" Lauren asked. I was silent for a moment, then nodded. "I don't want a war, but I won't stay silent anymore." Brandon started calling a week after I didn't return home. At first, he sounded gentle, then worried, and eventually suspicious. "How long do you plan to stay away? Why won't you talk to me?" he said tensely during a Saturday night call. "I need time to heal," I replied, "and to sort things out." I wasn't lying. I really was sorting things out. My whole life. When the divorce papers were officially filed, Brandon didn't react immediately, but the following week his lawyer responded with a request for 70% of shared assets, including our current apartment and joint investments. Lauren just smiled while reading the letter. "We'll respond with a statement that we're fully prepared to present all evidence in court," she said. "And we'll emphasize that if this goes public, his personal and financial reputation could take a serious hit." 3 days later, Brandon's lawyer called back. His tone completely softened. "My client would prefer a more peaceful agreement. He's willing to give up the apartment entirely and won't request a share of the financial portfolio." Lauren looked at me. "Do you want to accept this offer?" I nodded. "I don't need much. I just want my freedom." In the weeks that followed, I focused on recovery and gradually returned to work remotely. The Aurora project was still progressing well. My team kept me updated and, surprisingly, they were doing great without me. I didn't feel left behind. I felt liberated. One late evening, Avery and I sat on her apartment balcony, looking out at the golden city lights reflecting off the lake. I held my tea mug a little tighter. "Do you regret it?" Avery asked softly. I shook my head slowly. "No. If I regret anything, it's not doing this sooner." And then my phone buzzed. It was a message from my mother. "Heard you stirred everything up. Have you thought about the family's reputation?" I didn't respond. I just stared at the words for a long moment, then deleted the message. Not because I was angry, but because I no longer needed them to define my worth. I knew who stood with me now. And more importantly, I had finally chosen to stand with myself. 2 weeks after finalizing the divorce, I decided to close another chapter I'd clung to for too long: my biological family. I sent a simple message to my mother. "I want to see you and Dad." Just once. It didn't take long to get a reply. "All right." Sunday afternoon. Same house. That morning, I sat in front of the mirror for a long time. Not to choose an outfit, but to remind myself that I wasn't going there to apologize, and certainly not to seek the approval I should have had long ago. My parents' house in the eastern suburbs of Bellevue looked just as it did the last time I was there. Neatly trimmed garden, crisp white curtains, and the stone statue of a nightingale by the walkway standing silent like a wordless gatekeeper. I stepped up the porch and rang the bell. My mother opened the door, her usual coldness impossible to hide. "Come in," she said, avoiding eye contact. "Your father's in the living room, reading the paper." I stepped inside. The house smelled faintly of lavender and something else. Too quiet, too stifling. My father, Henry, looked up when he saw me. He folded the newspaper, set it down, and crossed his arms. "I thought you were too busy," my father said, his tone laced with sarcasm. I didn't respond. I pulled out a chair and sat down, face to face with the two people who gave me life, who raised me, and who chose to love Sienna with all the affection that should have been shared. "I didn't come here to argue," I began, keeping my voice calm. "I just want to say what I need to say one last time." My mother crossed her arms, her gaze sharp as a blade. "If this is about us not showing up at the hospital, don't bother. Everyone was busy, and Sienna had a prior engagement." "It's not just about the hospital," I cut in, for the first time in my life not hesitating to interrupt her. "It's years. It's the dinners where I was ignored. It's the holidays where only Sienna's name was celebrated. It's the way you always compared me. It's Dad's silence while it all happened. My father frowned slightly. You're an adult, independent, with a job and a husband. We thought you didn't need. I let out a quiet laugh, not mocking, not bitter, just full of regret. I used to think like you, Dad, that if I succeeded I'd be loved. But that's not how it works. Love isn't a reward, it's a foundation. And I never got that from this family. My mother gripped the arm of her chair tightly. You're too sensitive. You can't accept reality. You always think of yourself as the victim. I looked her straight in the eyes. No, Mom. I don't see myself as a victim anymore. I just refuse to keep playing the invisible one. The room fell silent. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a photo, a picture of Brandon, my mother, my father, and Sienna toasting on the yacht. I laid it on the glass table without a word. My mother's eyes widened for a moment, and my father fell completely silent, his expression hardening. So, my mother whispered. I nodded. While I was lying in a hospital bed? On my birthday. And you were out celebrating like I didn't exist. My father stood up and turned away as if trying to escape the truth. My mother, though trying to remain composed, couldn't hide her unease. Brandon told me the trip had nothing to do with you, that you were too busy, didn't want to come. And you believed him? I looked at her, steady. I don't blame you for being deceived. I blame you for never asking me, only choosing to believe what you wanted to. I stood up. I didn't come here to take anything back. I came to say, I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I need to be free. I'm done waiting for validation. I've chosen my own life. I turned to leave, but before I stepped out, I stopped and spoke clearly. A real family doesn't betray each other. A real family doesn't leave someone out of the celebration without a single word. If that never existed here, then I'll make a new one for myself. My mother said nothing. My father didn't look back. I walked out of that house for the last time, carrying with me a soul that felt weightless. Free from resentment, free from pain, just free. On the way back, I rolled down the car window. The cool April wind brushed against my face, sweeping away everything old. I was no longer Madeline Carter, the daughter who once longed for love from her blood family. I was now the woman who chose to love herself first. 4 months after that final goodbye, I officially signed the paperwork to launch my own architecture firm, Lumen Studio. The name came from a lighting design concept, Lumen, the unit that measures the amount of light emitted from a source. I wanted my company to be just that, a source of light, small but steady and unmistakable. Lumen Studio was based in a small loft space in Capitol Hill, overlooking moss-covered rooftops and cherry trees leaning over narrow streets. I didn't start with a big team. Just me, a fresh out-of-school architect named Jaden, and Aria, a multitasking admin who also handled scheduling. But the three of us shared a belief that architecture wasn't just about building, it was about healing. Our first project came from a chance conversation. One day, I was attending a community seminar at the local medical center with Nina, the nurse who once cared for me. After the session, a middle-aged woman came up to speak with me. Her name was Monica Hale, executive director of Sunny Haven, a children's shelter on the south side of the city. We're looking for someone who can redesign the old nursery and toddler wing, she said, eyes both hesitant and hopeful. The building's from 1972. The plaster's falling apart, there's barely any natural light, and funding is tight. I looked at the old floor plans she handed me and nodded without hesitation. We'll do it, no design fee. Sunny Haven became our turning point. Jaden and I visited the site weekly, rebuilt the entire model, and proposed energy-saving solutions, natural light optimization, and open play spaces for the children. Though small in scale, the project gained strong community attention, and that's how Lumen Studio's name started spreading. But not all changes came from work. One late afternoon, as I was sketching a section of a vaulted ceiling at the office, Nina walked in with a mischievous smile. In her hand were 2 takeout coffees. Coffee for the dedicated architect, and "I've got something to propose," she said, then winked. "Are you free tonight? I have someone you need to meet." I raised an eyebrow. "Who am I meeting?" "My brother," she answered quickly. "His name's Matthew, a pediatrician at Seattle Children's. He's a bit too quiet for his own good, so I thought he could use someone a little stronger to pull him out of his world of stethoscopes and charts." I laughed. "And you think that person is me?" "You're more than that." Our first date took place at a small cafe tucked beneath golden maple trees. Matthew was just as Nina had described. Tall, a bit reserved at first, but with incredibly kind eyes. We talked through the entire meal, not about anything grand, but the little things. He told me about a 4-year-old boy who loved dinosaurs so much he demanded T-Rex-themed bandages. I told him about a 3rd-grade boy at the shelter who helped me choose the paint color for the new playground. After that evening, we started seeing each other every weekend, sometimes walking around Green Lake, sometimes just sitting on the porch, drinking tea and reading. It wasn't loud or fast, but it was gentle and deeply sincere. I didn't think I could believe in beginnings again, but Matthew didn't come into my life to fill a void. He made me realize I could live fully. Not by proving myself or carrying everything, but by giving and receiving, freely. One late night, as we were folding Lunar New Year gift boxes for the children at Sunny Haven, Matthew suddenly said, "I used to think you were too strong, like you didn't need anyone. But then I realized, maybe it's because you're strong, that you deserve real love." I froze for a second, still holding a piece of orange wrapping paper. "It's not that I want to save you," he added, "but if you'll let me, I'd like to walk beside you." I didn't say anything. I just reached for his hand and held it tightly. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to stand alone. And that's how I knew. My life, though once broken, was being rebuilt. Stronger than ever. One early March morning, as tulips began to bloom along Seattle's tree-lined streets, I received a letter in a cream envelope with no return address. Strange. I rarely received handwritten mail anymore, not in an age of emails and texts. I opened the envelope. The soft handwriting was instantly familiar. From the very first line, "Madeline." I don't know where to begin. But maybe it's finally time to say everything. I read each line, slowly, without stopping. It was from Sienna. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't think I deserve it. What Brandon and I did? There's no excuse. I always thought I was the one who had it all, the one who got the better end. But in the end, I realize I made the wrong choice." Sienna explained that after the truth came out, Brandon had been investigated for embezzling funds from a project he once managed. He lost his job, his reputation crumbled, and he was even temporarily barred from practicing due to ethical violations. My family, my mother and father, had invested their savings into high-return opportunities Brandon had promised. It all vanished. They had to sell their old car and move in with Sienna in her small apartment on the west side of the city. "Ironically," Sienna wrote, "only now do I understand what it feels like to be discarded, used. And I wish I hadn't turned my back on you back then." I folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I didn't need to hold on to it anymore. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel satisfied. I only felt certain of one thing. I made the right choice. Leaving toxic relationships, even ones labeled family, was necessary for me to fully live as myself. My 34th birthday arrived on one of Seattle's rare sunny days. There were no expensive gifts, no grand banquet, just a small, cozy gathering in the backyard of the new place I had just rented, with the people who truly stayed by my side through it all. Nina came early, bringing her homemade salad, Avery showed up with a red velvet cake that still smelled like butter. Jaden and Aria, my close colleagues at Lumen Studio, put together a photo board of all the projects we'd completed in our first year. I stood in the garden, looking at the string lights draped across the trees, listening to the happy chatter and laughter, and felt like a piece of my heart had been gently stitched back together with real kindness. Matthew arrived a little later. As usual, his hospital shift had run long, but when he walked through the gate, holding a bouquet of hydrangeas and wearing a warm smile, I knew that was enough. After dinner, everyone asked me to give a speech. I hadn't prepared anything, but I didn't need to. I stood up and raised my glass. Thank you all for being here tonight. There was a time I thought I'd never feel that sense of belonging again, the feeling of family. But I've realized family isn't where you're born. It's where you're chosen to stay, where you're respected, where you're lifted up. Everyone clapped. I smiled and was about to sit back down when Matthew stepped forward and placed his glass on the table. "Wait," he said, his voice steady and deep. The crowd fell quiet. I looked at him, puzzled, until he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small navy velvet box. And then he knelt down. "Madeline Carter, you are the strongest, most independent and sincere woman I've ever known. But what I love most about you isn't your strength. It's how you still believe in love, even after being hurt. I don't want to change you. I just want to walk with you. Will you build a new home with me? Not of bricks and stone, but of trust and respect?" The whole garden went silent. I covered my mouth, tears in my eyes. Then I nodded, without hesitation. "Yes, I will." Cheers erupted around us. Matthew stood, pulled me into his arms as applause and warm congratulations surrounded us. I rested my head on his shoulder and whispered through my breath, "At last, I've found my real family. Not by blood, but by love. Unconditional, unwavering." And in that moment, I knew I was truly beginning a new chapter. No more fear, no more doubt, only light, shining from those who chose to stay, and from my own heart that dared to rise again. From my story, I've learned that sometimes, to find the light, we have to walk through the deepest darkness. Family doesn't have to be where we're born, it's where we're heard, loved, and never betrayed. I lost a lot. Trust, relationships, even illusions. But in return, I found myself. Life doesn't restart, it simply shifts course. And when we're brave enough to let go, the right things will always find their way to us. What do you think of Madeline's journey? What would you do if you were in her place? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, meaningful stories about life and family. I was making coffee when my phone buzzed softly on the table. A message appeared, short, cold as steel. "You are not invited to the wedding. Mason's family doesn't want you there." No exclamation mark, no apology, just a few hollow words landing on my face like a slap in broad daylight. My mother, Evelyn Hayes, the same woman who once held my hand through snowy streets, had now erased me from her life with a single line. I gently set down my coffee cup, the soft metallic clink slicing through the quiet. My fingers slid across the screen, typing each word slowly, deliberately. "So you've chosen status over family?" No emojis, no quotation marks, just the plain truth between two people who once called each other family. Right after, I opened my laptop, logged into the wedding reservation account. The name glowing on the invoice was Aria Hayes, no one else's. I had paid the $4,500 deposit for my sister Olivia's wedding. They had no idea. They were so used to receiving what I gave, they never bothered asking who paid the price. I hovered over the cancel reservation button. A red warning flashed, non-refundable. Didn't matter. I clicked confirm. The feeling was strange. No anger, no heartbreak, just a quiet shift, as if a part of me had stepped aside, watching everything unfold with unfamiliar detachment. Mother used to be more subtle than this. She never said it out loud, but her glances when I entered a room, the snide jokes at dinner, the way my birthday slipped through the cracks 3 years in a row, all of it spoke louder than words. I was never really family. Olivia was different. She was the perfect daughter in their eyes. Sweet, agreeable, always knowing how to please. And me? I was Aria, the daughter who asked questions when money vanished from shared accounts without explanation, the daughter who never knew when to stay silent. Apparently, I didn't fit the kind of energy Mason's family preferred, all because I wore black to brunch, or dared to ask where the missing $2,800 in catering costs had gone, while Mom waved it off with a casual, "Just trust me." I had always been the convenient daughter, until they no longer needed me. When Mason, Olivia's fiancé, remarked that my presence made the atmosphere heavy, they nodded without hesitation. I stared at the screen, at the line, "Reservation canceled by account owner." A strange lightness washed over me. No one in that family expected me to react. They were too used to my silence, too comfortable with my compliance. But today, they were wrong. I closed the laptop. The small kitchen suddenly felt more spacious, as if I had just flung open a door that had been sealed shut for years. There was nothing left to hold on to. That message wasn't a surprise. It was merely the final confirmation of a truth I had known, but refused to accept. I was no longer part of the family portrait they so carefully curated. The bitter irony? They were the ones holding the scissors when they cut me out of the frame. I can't even recall when my family last threw me a birthday celebration. Maybe when I turned 16? That year, Mom baked a cake too small for the number of guests, and right after the candles were blown out, she turned to Olivia, asking what kind of party she wanted for her big milestone next year. Since then, my birthdays had been reduced to curt messages or, worse, utter silence. Their excuses were always the same. Busy, forgot, the group chat must have glitched. But when it came to Olivia's birthday, the house would light up with balloons and oversized printed photos, as if she were the center of the universe. And me? I was mentioned when the kitchen sink leaked, when Mason needed help finding a penthouse below market rate, when Mom forgot her credit card while ordering wedding flowers, when Olivia needed someone to fix the wedding invitations last minute. Every time it was me. No, every time it was the walking wallet named Aria Hayes. Mom would say, "You're an accountant, honey. This money stuff is child's play for you." Mason was more charming about it. "You're the most meticulous person I know. Honestly, I trust you more than any of those vendors." They said those things right up until the bills were paid. I was the one who found the wedding venue when Olivia dismissed all of Mom's suggestions as tacky. I was the one who contacted, negotiated, and got the price down from $15,000 to $11,500. Paid a $3,000 deposit with my credit card, reassured by the familiar promise, "Mom will pay you back as soon as Mason transfers the money." That day never happened. I was also the one who built the wedding website from start to finish. That night, while my friends were hanging out at a bar down the street, I sat alone in front of my screen, adjusting every font, every transition effect. And the next day, I heard Olivia sneer. "It's okay, but Mason will probably want to tweak a few things to better match the aesthetic." I was used to that. So used to it that it didn't even make me sad anymore. But there was one small moment, a very small one, that woke me up. It was when Mason accidentally let slip a comment during dinner. "Aria, if you don't help, who's going to handle this wedding? Olivia's not good with the meticulous stuff." I smiled. From the outside, someone might think it was a cheerful smile. But in reality, it was the smile of a person who just realized they were being treated as a tool. Nothing more. Yet invisibility doesn't happen instantly. It seeps in, slowly, quietly, like mold in a house with shuttered windows. It started with the times they forgot to invite me to important family meetings, with photos of Olivia trying on wedding dresses that I only saw through a mutual friend's story, with Mason hosting an engagement party with his family, and my mother beaming among the crowd, while I never received an invitation. When I asked, Mom just shrugged. Everyone thought you were busy. Besides, it's really a thing for the main families only. Main families. A simple, compound word, yet enough to chill the entire dining table by a few degrees. I used to think that if I tried hard enough, they would see my value. But in reality, they already saw it. That value just happened to be the numbers in my bank account. Once, Mom accidentally said to Olivia, "If it weren't for Aria, I'd have to hire a professional wedding planner. Imagine how expensive that would be." Olivia laughed, softly but loud enough for me to hear. "But we have Aria, free and dedicated." Dedicated. I don't know when dedicated became synonymous with being used. They didn't need me in the wedding photos. They only needed my name on the contract. They didn't need me standing next to them during the ceremony. They just needed my bank account to keep functioning. I realized, in their eyes, I had never been family. Just a servant in an invisible robe, always ready to bow at their call. And when that robe became cumbersome, they wouldn't hesitate to rip it off. The day Mom texted me to exclude me from the wedding, she had no idea that robe had long since fallen away. Only this time, I didn't bother picking it back up. I'm not the kind of person who likes snooping through others' messages. But this time, it wasn't snooping. A notification from the group chat Olivia's dream wedding crew popped up right in the middle of the screen when I was still the admin of the shared Google Drive folder. One accidental click, but enough to expose everything. The first line made me freeze. Why would Aria even attend? Free labor is good enough. Below that, one of Olivia's close friends chimed in. "It works out. Honestly, let her handle all the heavy tasks. Watching Olivia stress is enough to make her jump in automatically." I didn't know where that jump in automatically label came from. Probably from the countless times I patched up holes in the wedding plans they forgot. But what really made me pause was the next message. "She fits the support role better than being a guest. Always feels off-key, out of place." Two gentle words, yet more direct than any fancy phrases Mom or Olivia had ever used to justify the distance. I sat up straight. The coffee cup had gone cold without me noticing, its bitterness no less harsh than the feeling in my chest. The worst part was, I wasn't surprised. I had seen this coming, from the way Olivia looked at me when Mason praised my choice of the ideal venue, from Mom's smirk when I suggested cost-saving ideas for the wedding. I just didn't want to admit it sooner. The laptop screen was still lit. Under Drive shared with me were dozens of folders carefully named by me. Olivia and Mason, save the date, guest list, final, vendor contracts, confirmed. All were my hard work. They didn't know Olivia had used my Canva account to make the invitations. Mason even asked me to design the wedding menu. He proudly showed off to friends as Olivia's creation. A systematic kind of forgetting. Intentional. I opened the main folder, hovered over the Remove Access button. One by one, the folders disappeared from the shared list. They would realize it when they needed to print invitations, when they wanted to confirm the restaurant contract, when they prepared the wedding photo slideshow. At that time, they would only see a blank screen and the message, "You no longer have access to this folder." I switched to the restaurant reservation website account. The email Aria Hayes Work still had admin rights. It was funny how the person they saw as background support was the one holding the key to this entire wedding. I didn't delete the contract. I simply changed the reservation status to canceled by account owner. Unsimple line, yet more effective than 100 scoldings. When they received the cancellation confirmation email, when Olivia's phone rang because the restaurant staff called to verify, when Mom frantically asked why everything suddenly disappeared, I would not be there to hear any explanations. No more emails from me. No more cleaning up their mess. I closed the laptop but didn't leave my seat. The feeling was strange. Not relief, not triumph. Just a quiet emptiness. As if I had just lifted off a stone that had weighed on my chest for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to breathe freely. I knew they would call. Mom would text, starting with, "It was just a misunderstanding, sweetheart." Olivia would accuse me of being petty, of not thinking about the family on such an important day. Mason would probably stay silent, waiting until everything settled before stepping in to play the role of the kind mediator. But this time, I wouldn't respond, because I used to be the one who patched up all their mistakes. Unfortunately, they never imagined a day they'd have to fix things on their own. And they'd soon find that out, without anyone needing to tell them. That morning, just as I was about to shut my laptop after a night of erasing every wedding file, a pale yellow envelope sat quietly at the door. No sender name, no address, just 3 shaky handwritten words in the top corner, "For Aria." I sat down, turned it over, carefully opened it. Inside was a thick stack of printed papers, along with a small silver USB drive. A short note sat on top. "You don't deserve this. Here's what they've been hiding. K." I didn't know anyone named K, but I recognized the handwriting. It was Kayla Summers, a former colleague at my old company, the one I helped through a small accounting scandal that the entire finance department tried to pin on her. We weren't close, but apparently she hadn't forgotten. I plugged the USB into my laptop. A folder appeared, blunt and simple. Mason and Olivia, malicious and original files. I opened each file one by one. The first audio recording made my blood run cold. "Mason, Aria transferred money again. She's so easy to manipulate." Olivia's voice, giggling. Mason replied, just as mocking, "As long as she still thinks she's the nice big sister, we'll keep using her. I haven't even asked her to pay for the cake yet." I sat, frozen, eyes wide open. Next came a chat thread from Olivia's friend group. One person asked, "Does Aria know what you've been saying behind her back?" Olivia replied, "Who cares? She never reacts anyway. Knowing how to stay quiet is a blessing for the whole family." At that moment, I didn't feel the rage I thought I would. Instead, there was a strange sense of clarity, like someone had finally pulled back the last curtain and let everything be seen under the light. I opened the transactions folder. Kayla had carefully compiled all the bank statements, transfers from my account to wedding expenses. Total, $12,400. Each transaction was a bitter reminder of the dedication I had been forced to wear like a uniform. But this time, I wasn't going to respond the way I used to. I opened my phone and created a new folder named Final Cut. Every recording, every statement, every screenshot was organized neatly, like laying each brick for the final blow. I knew Olivia would host the rehearsal dinner at Sapphire Ridge Country Club, just 20 minutes from my house. A flashy, luxurious place, perfect for exposing a truth far less glamorous. But I didn't want to stop at just embarrassment. I wanted them to taste the same feeling of being erased, reduced to a tool, taken advantage of without a hint of remorse. I call Kristen, an old friend from the audit department, now running a data forensics firm. I didn't need to say much. She only asked, "Do you want full verification or just enough to protect yourself?" I answered, "Everything, and I want it public." Within 2 hours, Kristen sent back the verification report. All files from the USB were original, unedited with full metadata, traced back to an old device owned by Olivia and Mason. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. The plan was clear. No drama, no show. I wouldn't send a scathing email, nor write some drawn-out social media post like they always did. I'd let them speak for themselves. Only this time, I'd be the one holding the microphone. Everything would end at that dinner. And this time, there would be nowhere left to hide. That afternoon, Sapphire Ridge Country Club wore its polished facade as if the word deception had never existed. Every crystal chandelier sparkled from the high ceiling, every delicate ribbon curled around the railings. Everything looked perfect, at least to those who had never stepped behind the stage. I intentionally arrived late. When I walked into the banquet hall, Olivia was beaming on a small stage. Mason stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her back as if they were the model couple everyone should envy. My mother sat at the front table, her eyes scanning the crowd with a fake look of satisfaction. No one expected me to show up. In fact, as I stepped through the door, a few heads turned with confused expressions. My presence here, among those who had deliberately erased my name from the guest list, felt like a system glitch, disrupting the carefully programmed show they had built. I didn't speak immediately. I wanted them to savor that sweet sense of victory a little longer. It wasn't until Olivia raised her glass, preparing to give a speech, that I slowly made my way toward the podium. The sound of my heels striking the wooden floor echoed steadily, slicing through the whispers rising in the room. "Sorry to interrupt," I said, gently lifting a glass from the nearest table, tapping my spoon against it 3 times. The clear chime pulled the entire room into silence. Olivia stiffened. Mason frowned. My mother exchanged a flustered glance with my father, her lips mouthing my name but failing to form a sound. I placed a small speaker on the podium, calmly plugging in the silver USB drive. No one stopped me. Perhaps they were too shocked. Or maybe, deep down, they already knew something was about to happen. Before the party continues, I think everyone should hear a few very honest things. Olivia's voice rang out from the speaker, crystal clear, without any distortion. "Mason, Aria transferred money again. She's so easy to manipulate." All eyes in the room immediately turned to the stage. Mason's face turned pale. Olivia forced a smile, but it vanished as soon as the next recording played. "As long as she still thinks she's the kind big sister, we'll keep using her. I haven't even asked her to cover the cake payment yet." The air grew so heavy it was suffocating. Someone dropped a fork, the sharp clatter tearing through the thick layer of pretense that had filled the room moments ago. I let the final clip play slowly, not rushing. Who cares? She never fights back anyway. Knowing when to stay quiet is a blessing for the whole family. Olivia took a step forward, about to say something, but I raised my hand to stop her. "Not done yet." That was when Kristen appeared from the back of the room, calmly walking toward me. The ID badge from her data security firm gleamed under the lights. "Good evening, everyone," Kristen said, her voice clear and firm. "I'm Kristen Miller, a data verification specialist. All the recordings and documents just presented are original files, unedited, with full metadata, directly sourced from Olivia and Mason's old devices. The data has been verified by an independent third party." Olivia stood frozen. Mason turned to look at her as if seeing the woman beside him for the first time. My father shot up, his face flushed red. "Aria, are you trying to disgrace our family in front of everyone?" I turned to him, my gaze calm. "No, I'm simply reminding everyone who started the disgrace in the first place." No one had anything else to say as I stepped down, leaving the small speaker to echo the last whispers of a group of people who once believed they had full control. I didn't need to say more. The truth was loud enough. The recording stopped. The room fell into a tense silence, so still I could hear someone holding their breath. I slowly opened my bag, taking out a carefully clipped folder, each page printed flat and precise, reflecting the preparation I had made for tonight. "Olivia," I looked straight at her, "would you like everyone to know who actually paid for all these lavish things here?" Olivia's face turned pale. Mason stepped back, as if one more touch would shatter his entire facade. I turned toward the hall. "Over the past 8 months, I have paid a total of $12,750 for this wedding. From the restaurant deposit, invitation fees, to the payment Olivia forgot when ordering the wedding cake." I raised the stack of papers, each one a bill, a bank statement, a transaction history from my account. I'm not saying this to ask for the money back. I'm saying it so everyone here understands that even the glamour you're seeing today was built on exploitation and lies. Mason clenched his fists but didn't step forward. Olivia was breathing heavily, as if one more sentence from me would bring her down. I handed the folder to Mason. "You're the groom. You should know who you're about to marry." Mason took the papers, but his eyes were fixed on Olivia. At that moment, I saw clearly that there was no longer blind defense in his gaze, only disgust mixed with bitterness. "Olivia," Mason spoke, his voice lowering. "You told me Arya always caused trouble, always made things up to drive us apart. But everything I've just heard, just seen, is real." Olivia faltered, her lips trembling as she searched for an excuse, but none came. My mother shot up, about to defend her daughter, but this time, I didn't let her. "Enough, Mom. This isn't a private family matter anymore. This is the consequence of silence. Of all the times you taught me that family means enduring each other." I turned back to Mason. "You still have time to choose." Mason tightened his grip on the folder. A few papers slipped to the floor, rustling like the sound of the last curtain being pulled down. "I've made my choice," Mason said, clear and firm. "I can't marry someone who treats her own family like a walking wallet and calls it love." Olivia stood frozen. "Mason, you can't." "I can. And it already happened." The hall buzzed with murmurs. Guests who had been smiling politely moments ago now whispered, avoiding my family's gaze as if dodging a fire. My mother collapsed back into her seat, her eyes empty, like someone who had just lost the most important piece on the board of reputation. The party wasn't over yet, but the so-called perfect family they had worked so hard to paint had already crumbled the moment I pressed play on that first recording. I adjusted my bag strap and walked away in silence. There was no need to look back at the wreckage left behind. I left the city on a misty morning with nothing but a small suitcase. My destination was Maple Hollow, a town deep in the Midwest where even phone maps took a few seconds to pinpoint its location. Exactly what I wanted. The temporary rental was an old wooden house, tucked behind a row of crimson maples. The wooden floors creaked softly with every step. But in return, the balcony opened to a quiet little lake, where I could sit for hours just listening to the rustling leaves and the breeze. In Maple Hollow, people didn't care much about your background. They only asked if the weather was nice today, if the fish were biting this season. The conversation ended there, just enough to feel human without feeling intruded upon. I enrolled in a document archiving and historical image preservation class at the Community Cultural Center. The work was slow, meticulous, but it brought me a strange sense of peace. Every old, worn piece of paper passing through my hands had value, whether it was a crumpled letter or a blurry photograph. Perhaps because, unlike how my family saw me, these items were never treated as replaceable objects. During the day, I helped at the town museum, organizing the archive storage. In the afternoon, I would stop by a small cafe on Main Street where Mrs. Helen, the silver-haired owner, always had a perfectly frothed cappuccino ready for me. Life here was so simple, it made it easy to forget the days when I had to justify my worth just to be acknowledged. I no longer felt anxious every time my phone vibrated. The suffocating calls, the demanding messages, had been left behind since the day I walked away. But that evening, while I was sorting through documents about an old oak wood monument, my phone lit up once more. At a brief message. "Olivia will be hosting a party to restore her image after the incident. Mom thinks you should be there, so people can see the family is still fine." I read it over and over, my heart unmoved. Still the same old mindset, where they needed a family image more than the essence of family itself. Still the way they made requests as if it was something I inevitably had to do. This time, instead of feeling pulled in, I suddenly realized they were simply repeating familiar lines, except I had long since stepped off that stage. I placed the phone face down, like closing an unnecessary page. No intention of replying, not out of anger nor avoidance, but because those people were no longer in my priority list. Freedom came quietly. It was simply the feeling of opening my eyes in the morning, knowing for sure that today, I wouldn't have to strain myself to please anyone else. And that, in itself, was more decisive than any rejection. Since the day I left, the Hayes family seemed to have lost control. And they were used to living with the assurance that I would always be there, one phone call away to clean up their messes, handle their troubles, and of course, cover any expenses when needed. But this time, every phone call met with a long dial tone. Every message sent disappeared into the void without a single reply. They tried email. They tried reaching out through old friends. They even showed up at my former office, where the new receptionist gave them a flat response. Miss Arya no longer works here. Silence, little by little, eroded their confidence faster than any harsh retort ever could. I didn't need to say a word. They stirred up their own muddy waters, and now they had to wade through it without anyone to hold their hand. One morning, while I was organizing photo archives at the town museum, I received an email from a legal address. It wasn't addressed to me, but it was a notification about Mr. Alan Hayes, my father, being investigated for illegal property transfers. I wasn't surprised. Last year, while struggling with credit card debts and a bruised ego from early retirement, he had attempted to mortgage the family land, the only remaining asset still under my name, for many years. The thing was, back then I had quietly taken legal steps to protect ownership, locking the transaction with restrictive clauses. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't cancel his actions. I simply let things play out. And when Mr. Hayes aggressively tried to negotiate that land once more, those clauses automatically activated. The contract was nullified, and the records were immediately reported to the Asset Audit Authority. They called it property fraud. I didn't intervene. I didn't need to. Just like with Olivia and Mason, all I did was stop patching up the holes they had dug themselves. When I was still there, I naively thought I was preserving a family. But in reality, I was merely dragged in to be a support pillar for a structure already rotten from the inside. Without me, they crumbled, not because I pushed, but because their foundation of lies had no anchor left. From Maple Hollow, I read news about my old family as if watching a play whose ending I already knew. The press mentioned the investigation into Mr. Hayes. Rumors spread about Mason being ousted from his financial management position at the company after wedding ghost expenses were exposed. Olivia, in an attempt to salvage some spotlight, hosted a live stream, but the audience focused only on questions about the family scandal, ignoring the product she was trying to sell. I felt no joy. The comfort I felt came from something else. Peace and quiet. When freed from expectations, pressures, and the role of the ideal big sister, I finally realized how trapped I had been. I began spending more time at the museum, taking on additional photo restoration projects for the local library. Old, faded photos, seemingly worthless, became clear again under my hands. They deserved to be restored to their true value, without being exploited or showcased for false glory. One afternoon, while editing a portrait from the 1930s, Mrs. Helen gently placed a letter in front of me. Not from family. It was an offer to manage the long-term archives for the Maple Hollow Heritage. I smiled. Not a victorious smile, nor a smug one. Simply the smile of someone who knows they have finally written a new chapter for themselves, without anyone directing from behind. Here, among people who didn't question the past, I found the version of Arya I had long forgotten. Calm, steady, and completely free. I closed the last bank account linked to the Hayes family on an early winter morning. The card tied to every emergency rescue was cut in half and dropped into the bank's recycling bin. That gesture felt strangely light, as if I had untied a rope that had been strangling my chest for years. Next was the phone number. Bank blocking is what people do when they still care. I wiped every trace clean, switched to a new service, even changed my identity on the contract. From that moment on, every call, every message, every familiar cry for help from my old family would echo into nothingness. I also cleaned up my personal accounts. The access Olivia once used to edit the wedding website. The shared documents with Mom and Mason. Each one was deleted. The access history was closed forever. Everything they once considered shared assets now only existed in their memories. On the other side, the Hayes family must have started feeling adrift. For years, they lived comfortably with my silent presence as an invisible insurance policy. Now, with that umbrella taken away, the real storm was revealed. They could survive scandals. They knew how to polish their image after each fall. But without a cleanup crew, without someone to handle the aftermath, even the smallest cracks magnified into irreparable fractures. The entire family struggled in an information blackout. They were used to the feeling of pulling my strings like a compliant puppet. Now, when they tugged, they only grasped at empty air, lost like wanderers in the maze they had built themselves. News of Mr. Hayes' investigation for asset fraud spread faster than they anticipated. Shady transactions, reckless loans funneled into dubious projects. Everything was laid bare without the backstage hand to clean it up. I added nothing to it. Everything simply followed its natural course of consequences. Just like Olivia. Since the day Mason called off the wedding, she scrambled to build a new facade on social media. But her act lacked one crucial element: my silent support. Without someone skillfully editing, erasing traces of mistakes, old cracks began to resurface clearly. Negative comments piled up, sponsorship deals slowly vanished. Mason, too, floundered with company funds he could no longer account for. From Maple Hollow, I watched everything as if seeing paper kites with their strings cut, swaying helplessly in the strong wind. Each person drifting in a different direction, staggering and fragile. I no longer had to be responsible for them. Instead, I focused on smaller yet much sturdier values: a well-organized archive, a historical photo restoration project about to start at the county library, a community that didn't care where I came from, only what I was doing. One afternoon, while labeling a batch of old files, I caught my own reflection in the glass of a display cabinet. It was a different Aria. Calm, steady, no longer chasing after someone else's definition of self-worth. Maple Hollow eased into winter as slowly as its pace of life. Each morning, thin veils of mist floated lazily over the lake, the wind slipping through wooden shutters, leaving a gentle, non-biting chill. I grew accustomed to opening my eyes without the sound of any notification ringing. My schedule had become so simple it felt peaceful. Mornings at the library, afternoons at the museum, evenings back at the small cabin under the maples. Lighting a candle to read or simply sitting quietly, listening to the crackling firewood in the stove. The silence that once felt empty was now the only thing that let me truly feel the fullness of each moment. Myself, the work I was doing, the choices I was living, all were enough, without anyone's recognition. One early December day, I stopped by the town post office to pick up a shipment of research books. The clerk, Maggie, handed me another envelope, with no sender's name. Inside was a simple printout, no logo, no header. Just a faded photo, the Hayes family at a recent event. I wasn't in it. The photo was sent as a subtle reminder, or perhaps as an effort to pull me back into that outdated frame. I folded the paper and placed it on the counter. Instead of bringing it home, I asked Maggie to place it in the recycling tray at the back. The past didn't need to be torn apart or exposed. It just needed to be neatly folded away and left to fade on its own. On the way back, I stopped by the wood-carving shop, where Mr. Calvin, an old craftsman who had lived in Maple Hollow since before my father was born, was finishing a new wooden sign for the library. He asked if I wanted to engrave my name on the mailbox soon to be installed at my cabin. I thought for a moment, then shook my head. "No name needed, sir, just a sentence." I handed him a small note, on which I had written, "This mailbox does not accept expectations from others." Calvin read it, nodded without saying more. A few days later, the small sign was neatly mounted next to the dark brown mailbox, standing out against the white snow covering the path. I gazed at that sentence under the dim afternoon light. A small symbol, yet clearer than any declaration I had ever heard. Peace doesn't come from victories or bringing others down. It comes from the moment you realize you've chosen to step away from that race long ago. The Hayes family might keep searching for me in the corners of the stories they fabricate. They can build as many new narratives as they want. The only thing they can no longer do is place me back into my old role in their story. I had written my own version, slowly, meticulously, without embellishment. And that was the true final blow. Arya's story is not a loud revenge, but a journey of letting go of toxic ties to rediscover her true worth. She didn't win by defeating anyone, but by stepping away from a game where she was only seen as a tool. In today's world, sometimes strength doesn't lie in fighting back or proving oneself, but in the choice to stay silent, to walk away, to live a decent life on your own terms. And let those who once exploited you face the consequences themselves. What do you think about Arya's choice? Is silence the most fitting answer? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel to explore more meaningful stories about family and life.